Okay, so we shall continue the next chapter under drugs acting on the GIT, that is drugs for inflammatory bowel disease, which is commonly known as IBD. Coming to the outline of the chapter, we shall discuss the classifications, then the aminosalicylates, the classes, okay, of the drugs which are used in the treatment of IBD. First class is aminosalicylates, next is the corticosteroids, and the last one is the immunosuppressants. Now, before going into the actual chapter, uh, you all all must be aware of what IBD is. That is inflammatory bowel disease. As the name implies, there is an inflammatory condition pertaining to the bowel, specifically the colon, the intestines, the large intestines are basically involved over here. In certain cases, throughout the entire GIT, the mucosa may also be involved. So already the pathophysiology is covered under your anatomy, physiology and pathophysiology. So as you are all aware, this inflammatory bowel disease, it comprises of two conditions, that is ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So these are quite closely related to each other and it involves the GIT. Okay, maybe a part or entire GIT. So that's how they are clubbed together under one particular head, that is inflammatory bowel disease. Now coming to the classification of the drugs which are used, the first class is aminosalicylates. Examples under this include sulfasalazine, mesalazine, olsalazine and balsalazine. The second class is corticosteroids. Under this, the first example is prednisolone and the second one is the hydrocortisone. So these are the two corticosteroids which are commonly used in IBD treatment. And the third and the last class is immunosuppressants. Okay, so immunosuppressants meaning the drugs which can suppress the immune response. So under this, drugs effective in IBD include azathioprine, methotrexate, cyclosporin and infliximab. So with this we shall start with the first class, that is aminosalicylates. So under that the first drug is sulfasalazine. Now this drug is also known as salicyl azosulfapyridine. This is another name given to this drug, sulfasalazine. It is commonly called as sulfasalazine. Now basically this particular drug, it comprises of two components. Okay, first one is a 5-aminosalicylic acid, which is abbreviated as 5-ASA. This is the accepted short form for 5-aminosalicylic acid, ASA. Okay, so this particular drug sulfasalazine, it is composed of this 5-ASA, that is 5-aminosalicylic acid, as well as sulfapyridine. So these two moieties, these are linked together through an azo bond. Okay, so that's how it gives rise to sulfasalazine. So two different moieties are joined together through an azo bond. So that forms the drug sulfasalazine. Now actually this drug has low solubility. So that is the reason why it is poorly absorbed from the ileum or your small intestine. So the drug will not be absorbed from the small intestine. So that's how it is carried towards your large intestine. And in large intestine, you all are aware that there are certain bacteria which are present, right? So colonic bacteria which is present in your colon, in your large intestine, what they will do is they will break that azo bond. So they will split that azo bond. So once that azo bond is split, both the moieties, we have seen that these two are joined together through an azo bond. So this azo bond is split by the colonic bacteria. So once this azo bond is split, free 5-ASA and sulfapyridine are released. Okay, so both the moieties are released. Now basically it is this particular substance, that is 5-ASA, that is 5-aminosalicylic acid, which is actually responsible for local anti-inflammatory effect. That is, once it reaches the colon, as we have seen under introduction, that basically in IBD the colon or your large intestine is involved. So this drug, it is released locally and it acts locally as an anti-inflammatory compound. Okay, but the actual mechanism may not be clear, but it is understood that it can inhibit the COX and LOX. We have seen this under PG synthesis, right? COX enzyme leads to formation of the prostaglandins and thromboxane, right, from the arachidonic acid, and LOX pathway, it generates the leukotrienes from the arachidonic acid. Okay, so since this particular compound inhibits both these enzymes locally, it will decrease the PG and LT production. So this may be one of the pathway responsible for its therapeutic effect. Apart from that, it may also inhibit the cytokines or platelet activating factor or TNF alpha and nuclear transcription factor, that is NFKB generation. Okay, so that's more important mechanism uh, involved in the anti-inflammatory action. Okay, so because of all this inhibition of the transmitters, okay, release of the transmitters, so this also inhibits the migration of the inflammatory cells towards the bowel. So whenever there is inflammation in particular site in our body, generally certain cells, leukocytes, migrate towards that particular area to process, to carry out the further processes of the inflammation. Okay, so this migration of the WBCs is also interfered. Also the mucosal secretions which take place, okay, which is basically responsible for the increased diarrhea precipitation. Watery stools may be seen, which is a characteristic symptom to this condition. So that is also reduced, okay, because of maybe inhibition of the inflammatory mediator release. Okay, so this particular drug, apart from modifying the pathophysiology, when this drug is given during the exacerbations, that is whenever a certain condition becomes more severe, so at that time when this drug is given, sulfasalazine, it also reduces the number of stools which is passed. Okay, then the abdominal cramps which may be seen or fever which may be associated. So all these symptoms, associated symptoms, are very well controlled during the exacerbations. But they are less effective as compared to corticosteroids, which is the next class. So that is the reason why it is employed only in mild to moderate exacerbations. In case of severe exacerbations, corticosteroids are supposed to be preferred. Okay. Then the dose of this drug which is used, it includes 3 to 4 grams per day. So when you use this drug in this particular dose, okay, that is 3 to 4 grams per day, it will induce remission over a few weeks. That is remission meaning to decrease the severity of a particular pathological condition. So it can effectively control the symptoms and it can induce the remissions over a few weeks. So few weeks time is required for this drug to act. Okay, but the problem is that after you stop the treatment, when you start the treatment, after a few weeks treatment, remission will occur, the symptoms will disappear. But once you stop the treatment, again there are chances of relapses. That is, the disease will make a comeback. Okay, that is, again the symptoms will start appearing in that particular person. So chances of relapses are seen with this particular agent. Okay, whereas maintenance therapy, okay, if it is continued, say for example 1.5 to 2 grams per day. Okay, now maintenance therapy is something which is given later. Okay, so now as we have seen over here, the initial dose which is required to induce the remission, okay, that is to control the symptoms, is 3 to 4 grams per day. So this is continued for a few days till remission will occur, and after this to avoid this relapses, you can continue the treatment with a lower dose, that is 1.5 to 2 grams per day. So this will postpone the relapses. Okay, so relapse which occur after sudden stoppage of the drug, so that will not take place if you continue the treatment with a maintenance dose of 1.5 to 2 grams per day. Okay. Now this particular sulfapyridine moiety, okay, which is given along with it, it is bound to the sulfapyridine through an azo bond, right? So this sulfapyridine which is set free, Actually, the role of the sulfapyridine is only to serve as a carrier for this 5-ASA. Actually, this is the main moiety which is responsible for the action. Okay, so for therapeutic action, 5-ASA is basically responsible. Okay, but the role of sulfapyridine is just to carry this 5-ASA towards the colon, so that this 5-ASA is not absorbed into the small intestine and it will reach to your colon, and over there bacteria will break that azo bond and it will release the 5-ASA ASA free, so that it will act locally. Okay, so that 5-ASA is not absorbed in the earlier parts of the GI. It will reach its site of action, that is colon. However, the drawback of this sulfapyridine, which is used as a carrier, is that once it is released free into the colon, it may be absorbed into your systemic circulation and it is responsible for most of the adverse effects like say rashes, fever, joint pain, hemolysis and blood dyscrasiasis. Okay. Now, apart from these, so these are all the adverse effects due to release of sulfapyridine. Apart from this, nausea, vomiting, headache, malaise and anemia, these are the frequent side effects which are seen. Apart from that, oligozoospermia, that is decrease in the sperm count, may take place in case of males. So this may result in male infertility also due to the treatment with sulfasalazine. Another drawback with this sulfasalazine is it interferes with the folate absorption. Okay, so folic acid supplements may have to be given along with the sulfasalazine. Otherwise, there will be deficiency of folic acid in the body. Okay. Now, as such, this drug sulfasalazine, though we are studying it under IBD, this is also a drug which is used as a disease-modifying drug in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. But over there, in case of rheumatoid arthritis, the therapeutic property is because of this sulfapyridine. That is actually responsible for the therapeutic effect in the rheumatoid arthritis. Whereas when you use the same drug in IBD, it is the 5-ASA which is responsible for the therapeutic effect. Next drug is mesalazine, or it is also known as mesalamine. Actually, this is nothing but the official name given to 5-ASA. As we have seen earlier that sulfapyridine only acts as a carrier. So 5-ASA, that is actually responsible for the therapeutic effect in the IBD. Okay. So directly this 5-ASA can also be given, provided it is coated and it is formulated in the form of delayed release preparation, so that it is not absorbed into the stomach or the small intestine. Okay, so because it is formulated in the delayed release preparation, it is coated with acrylic polymer, so that this 5-ASA is not absorbed in small intestine, whereas it will reach the large intestine and it will released over there. So usually for this drug, 2.4 grams is the dose, daily dose which is required. Okay, and whatever 5-ASA is released, it will be absorbed ultimately into the systemic circulation, acetylated in the liver. That's how it is metabolized, and ultimately it is excreted in the urine. Coming to the adverse effects of this particular 5-ASA, that is nausea, diarrhea may be precipitated, abdominal pain, headache, rashes or hypersensitivity reactions may be seen. Also, this mesalazine is hepatotoxic also. Okay, so it is contraindicated in the kidney as well as the liver impairment. Okay, that is renal and hepatic impairment. Then the interactions. Now, this coated mesalazine, it can enhance the gastric toxicity of glucocorticoid, and it can also enhance the hypoglycemic action of sulfonylureas. Sulfonylureas are oral hypoglycemic, so their action may also be enhanced, and the gastric toxicity of glucocorticoids will be enhanced. So they should not be given together. This combination should be cautious. Then it can also interact with certain other drugs like coumarins, furosemide, spironolactone, methotrexate and rifampicin. Okay, so interactions are possible, so it is better to avoid these combinations. Next drug is olsalazine. Actually, this compound consists of two molecules of 5-amino salicylic acid. Okay, so which are coupled together with azo. So in case of sulfasalazine, we have seen that one 5-ASA molecule is combined with sulfapentate. But here two 5-ASA molecules are joined through an azo bond. So again, because of this combination, okay, this particular compound is not absorbed from the ileum, or it is poorly absorbed from the ileum. So it will go to the colon, and over there the colonic bacteria will split that azo bond, and 5-ASA, two 5-ASA molecules will be released free, and that's how they will act locally. Okay. Next drug is balsalazine. Now here this 5-ASA, which is an active moiety, it is linked to 4-amino benzoyl beta alanine. So this becomes a carrier now over here. Okay, so both are linked together. So this will carry it towards the colon. It will prevent the absorption of 5-ASA in the small intestine. 5-ASA will be released only once the drug reaches the colon, and over there it will produce its action locally. Whereas this carrier, it is not absorbed significantly. It is poorly absorbed. So that won't show any kind of adverse effects. So this finishes the first class. The second class is corticosteroids. Okay. So prednisolone and hydrocortisone are the two drugs. So this prednisolone, it is quite effective in inducing the remission in IBD. Okay, so it is a drug of choice for moderately severe exacerbations. Okay. Apart from this, hydrocortisone in the form of maybe enema or foam. So this can be also used topically for the treatment of proctitis. Now proctitis, it is an inflammation of the rectum, the internal rectum may be inflamed in this condition, or distal ulcerative colitis. Okay. Then the corticosteroids, these are generally discontinued after the remission. So once it is started, remission will occur. Okay, so once remission is occurred, generally corticosteroid treatment is supposed to be stopped, and it is continued. The treatment is continued with mesalazine. Okay, so to prevent the relapses after sudden stoppage of the treatment, sometimes the condition may relapse. So to avoid that, mesalazine is started once the steroid therapy is stopped. Whereas one more problem with the steroid therapy is that some patients with severe IBD, either they may relapse on stoppage of steroid. That is, once you stop the steroid treatment, relapse may occur. So these are known as steroid dependent. Only when you give the treatment, steroid treatment, to such patients, they will show the remission. Okay, once you stop the treatment, again the relapse will occur. So that's why they are known as steroid dependent. Or there are certain individuals who do not respond to this steroid therapy. So these are known as steroid resistant individuals. Okay, so in these cases, immunosuppressants are supposed to be preferred. Then the next class is immunosuppressants. Okay, first drug under this is azathioprine. Now this particular drug is the most commonly used immunosuppressant in the treatment of IBD. Okay, the response of this particular drug is delayed. That is, the response is seen after say a few weeks or months. But advantage is that it has lower toxicity. Okay, so it is specifically used for steroid resistant cases, the ones which we have seen just now. So certain individuals don't respond to the steroid therapy. So in such individuals, immunosuppressants can be given. Okay, so these can also maintain the remission. So once there is control in the symptom, relapse won't occur. Okay, when azathioprine is given. Next drug is methotrexate. So this particular drug also is effective in IBD, acts faster, okay, but the disadvantage is that higher doses are required. Okay, and by oral route again the efficacy is lower. So that's a limitation with this particular drug. Okay, so usually it is used in Crohn's disease or patients who are not responsive or not tolerating the azathioprine. So it's an alternative drug to azathioprine. Next is cyclosporin. So this particular drug is used to maintain the remission. So once the remission has taken place, control of symptoms has taken place, this drug can be started to maintain that remission so that relapse don't occur. Okay, but this is not a first line immunosuppressant. Okay, because this is the major limitation. Renal toxicity is a major limitation. That's why it is not a first line immunosuppressant. Okay, but it can be used as an alternative. So also oral efficacy is also poor with this particular agent. The next drug is infliximab. Actually, this is a chimeric anti-TNF alpha immunoglobulin. Okay, TNF alpha is one of the mediators, right? So it is an anti-TNF alpha immunoglobulin. Okay, so it is quite effective in IBD. So it is nowadays used to control the severe cases. Okay, so those which are not controlled by any other drug. So it can be treated with this particular drug, infliximab. Okay, so this finishes the chapter. The important questions related to this chapter is treatment of IBD. General 4 marks question can be asked like treatment of IBD or pharmacotherapy of IBD. So you need to explain the entire chapter in this particular part.